Hello, hello. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome officially to movie night at the Classic Motorsports Mitty. How you doing? We are live right now on the GRM live broadcast channels at Grassroots Motorsports Facebook, Grassroots Motorsports YouTube. Hopefully we have a lot of fans of our weekly live show in attendance here. If not, maybe you will join us for future live shows. I see a lot of our regular audience is actually watching online right now as we talk to this fine gentleman, Mr. John Morton, everybody. So, we're going to talk to John a little bit tonight about his career, about some of his history. If anybody has any questions, raise your hand. Feel free. We'll come to you. We'll try and get everything answered. But I want to start, we talked a lot about your cars last night. You were gracious enough to come spend some time with us. We talked a lot about the automobiles you drive. I want to talk a little bit about you tonight, John. So, you started racing in an era very different from today. What was it like starting, now if I want to go racing, I go through a school, I get a license, there's barriers, there's easily achievable barriers, but there are barriers. And there's a pathway to going sports car racing. What was the pathway like for you when you first started? What was your path to your first time behind the wheel of a sports car road race?
There wasn't any real pathway, very clearly defined. I went to racing school at Carroll Shelby's, which was 5 days. I mean, you don't get very smart in 5 days. But I got to go to school in the very first Cobra prototype, wow, which sold last year, 2 years ago, at Monterey for $12.5 million, and that was my school car. It wasn't worth that much back then. And then I worked for Shelby and bought a race car with money that I was supposed to go to college on.
We met some kids from Kennesaw State University earlier who were building race cars for college credit. So maybe you could have spun that love into some college credit back then. But as you were progressing, was there a moment when you were kind of behind the wheel, or you were thinking about how you were getting along in racing and thought to yourself, hey, I might be kind of good at this?
No, I never felt like that. I felt like, do I want to keep trying or give up? And I didn't give up, and I was kind of sort of born by Carroll Shelby. I mean by Peter Brock, and that's really what lit the fuse of the career that I had.
So you've dropped a few names in here on us already, and not trying to look cool, but you were mentored by some of the great names in motorsport. Pete Brock, Carroll Shelby, all of these guys who would become icons, and you would become an icon yourself at one point. Did you have an inkling back then that what you were creating and what you were involved in was something bigger than what it seemed like at the time?
No, not at all. No, I was just trying to survive. I didn't have any concept of the future, and the same with the people at Shelby's. They never had any concept of what they were doing was going to be historic. And nor did I, nor did any of the people at BRE, nor did Pete Brock. It just, kind of worked out that way.
So, do you remember the first race you ever won?
Yeah.
What were you driving?
A Lotus Super 7.
Wow. And what was, it's happened to me a couple times, mostly by accident. But the first time I ever saw a checkered flag, I guess I don't have enough ego to really feel like I deserved it. There was this sense of disbelief. And you seem like a kind of humble guy, but what was what was your impression when you first saw that checkered flag? Did you think, well, something has gone wrong here, obviously, that they're showing that to me? Or did you think, okay, yeah, we got this. I'm on the way to being John Morton now.
It wasn't that complicated. It was just exciting to win the first race. It was actually the second race I was in, and it was called a novice race in San Diego. And I was very elated to win. It was only a 15-minute race, and my crew, which were Shelby employees, said, we're going to celebrate tonight. We're going to take you to Tijuana and get you laid. Anyway.
And can you describe the gentleman that you were eventually...
That was a guy named Paul Anfang. He was a tire man for Shelby. And anyway, they did.
Do you keep in touch at all with
No,
them? Okay,
I don't.
good.
I'm not sure he's still alive. You know, the sad thing, I won my first race and had my first encounter on the same day. Very few people can say that. The sad thing is you had to be 21 to race back then.
So you obviously took to it, and it was a skill that you developed rather quickly. You won a Trans Am championship in this car we're standing right in front of. And was this the beginning of your relationship with Nissan at that point? Or had you had a prior relationship with them?
The beginning of my relationship with Nissan was Peter Brock, and it was the Datsun Roadster was the first car, which was a great car. I loved that car. I did a lot of the work on it myself. And the second step was the 240Z. And then the 510 was the kind of the culmination of the 4 year, like from 69 to the end of 72. All of this BRE stuff happened. And very much like the Shelby stuff, it started in 62, at the end of 62, and it was over by 67.
So eventually you ran the gamut of Nissans from that Brock-prepared Roadster to the Nissan GTP car that we saw last night, that we were lucky enough to hear get fired up over there. And you're developing this relationship with the company and with their cars. I don't want you to pick a favorite, but are there any that stand out in particular, models that stick with you to this day? I have to admit, it was very cool. Yeah, although you won a championship in this car, it was cool seeing you behind the wheel of that 240Z, leading that race off this morning. You know, just knowing how significant those cars are, seeing all the beautiful Zs here. Are there any Nissans in particular that stand out to you at this point?
I'd say it's a tie between this car and the Z car. I can't pick between. I made more money with this car because it was professional racing and you actually got paid to win. But the Z car was so iconic, and it really started, more than any other car launched the Nissan competition heritage, I think. It was before the 510, and the 510 just solidified it.
So in your retirement, you've had the chance to run a lot of neat stuff. I know you ran an MX-5 Cup a couple years ago. You're doing some vintage racing. Give me a little bit of a comparison in where you started and modern race cars. You know, is it easier to hop into a modern race car and go fast right out of the box than it was to develop these cars? Or is a race car, and as long as it's prepared well, you're going to be able to, a good driver will be able to go fast in it?
You know, I think if you raced these cars back in that day, you're an old man now. And the new cars feel awfully fast. But the new cars take away, to me, some of the charm of driving. You don't shift gears anymore. You just wiggle your fingers, and the cars are very good, but you buy one from a factory that's ready to race, And I don't know, it's not the way it used to be. I think from an engineering standpoint and a mechanic standpoint, it was more interesting in the past.
So how about tracks? So it's one thing I've never really discussed with you. Do you have any favorite track? Obviously, we're at one of, for my money, one of the best tracks anywhere in North America right now. There's so much history here. It's such a complex track, such a fast track. Are there any tracks, Road Atlanta included, that really sort of stand out in your mind as ones that you enjoyed?
Well, this is one of them. I think 75% of the drivers, if asked, would say Road America is their favorite American track. And it's mine too, but not just because of the layout of the track. I saw my first race there when I was in high school in 1957, and it's always had that spot in my heart. They're all good. Watkins Glen, Mid-Ohio, Elkhart Lake, Sears Point, not the right name anymore, but
Sonoma Raceway, I think they're calling it now. Or?
Yeah, and Riverside was great. I loved that. I was fortunate enough to, I went to racing school there, and the first Times Grand Prix was in 1958. Chuck Day won in a Scarab, which is my favorite car. And I was fortunate enough with Hurley Haywood to win the last race there, the last Times race in 1987 before they closed the track. So that's one of my proudest moments in racing.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions for John? Yes, sir. So the question is, did you ever run at Bridgehampton back in the day, a track that no longer exists now, one of our ghost tracks in the U.S.?
I did. I drove a Cobra there on the Shelby team in 1964, co-driving with Joe Freitas. I think Ken Miles won the race. And then in 60s, what's that? That's a pretty scary turn. Yeah. And then I drove the race there in 66 in my own Lotus.
Anybody else? Anybody? Yes, in the yellow shirt here. Yeah, so you came up in an era when obviously everybody you've mentioned so far is an icon. Who did you look up to? Who did you admire as a driver as you were progressing through the ranks?
You know, I admired all of the stars. Like Dan Gurney was one of my big heroes during that period, and he still is. Sadly, no longer with us. Phil Hill. The famous driver that actually kind of mentored me a little bit was Ken Miles, and I admired him. He had a little bit of a quirky personality, but he was an old man, old man at 47, I think, when he died, and he had just won Daytona, Sebring, and should have won Le Mans. So, he's one of my heroes.
All right, and I think right next to, the gray shirt right here. Yeah, so the question was, what was the factory involvement back in the day when you were starting? I mean, there's so many factory efforts now, but even a factory race effort generally contracts to a privateer shop. What was the relationship like back then between the Datsun factory and your team?
Well, the biggest contribution from Datsun factory, Nissan, was money. They had some racing parts, but we didn't use any of them. They had cylinder heads that were called FIA heads that had, the ports were too big for the displacement of the engines to make the kind of power it took to what we thought to win races. We had all of that sort of thing done locally, and I'm not being smug about it, but we developed all of our own stuff.
All right, yes, sir, standing up there, yes. A little louder, please. Richard Gordon? Did you ever have to race a gentleman named Richard Gordon?
Yeah, in a Volvo. Yeah, I did. It was pretty
Are
fast
you
Volvo.
Richard Gordon, sir? Okay. All right, in sunglasses there. Last question. So our question was, we have a Triumph owner in the audience here, and there were a lot of great manufacturer battles back in the Trans Am days, the 2.5 Trans Am days. Volvo and Datsun, obviously, and BMW, Alfa, and the Triumph. What can you tell us about challenging some of our British marks?
Well, the only car that ever threatened us in the C production with the Z car was Bob Tullius's Triumph TR6. In the Trans Am, there was a car called what the heck did they call it? Somebody must know.
The Herald.
It's not a Herald, but it was, it wasn't a threat. It was a 6-cylinder. It had potential, but we never had any trouble with that. It was called a Triumph Vitesse. My mind doesn't work very fast anymore.
All right, so we have one last question from our online audience. And we showed this video earlier of a commercial for the 240Z with you that looked an awful lot like it was filmed here at Road Atlanta. And what was it like? You were a race car driver, you were a mechanic, you were a developer, and now all of a sudden they're putting you in TV commercials back in the day. Did it seem like things were accelerating, faster than you had expected them to, when all of a sudden here you are, not just racing these cars, but selling them to people as well?
Yeah, I don't remember my reaction. I was flattered that they would use me because it meant you'd achieve some status. But I do remember, I did some radio ones also. And I remember my mother saying, who was very supportive usually, she said, "I'm so sick of hearing your voice."
All right, before we say goodbye, let's talk to Ethan Snyder real quick from Nissan. Ethan, there's a mic right over yonder there. Grab that. Ethan's one of the reps from Nissan here this weekend. Nissan, obviously, the featured mark, has jumped in with both feet to support this event. We are absolutely humbled by Nissan's involvement. So this guy standing over here, it was very interesting for me to watch the lineup of people getting autographs, because I noticed a lot of the Nissan crew in that line as well. So, what's it mean for you guys to have icons like this, as being representatives for your car? What's this mean for Nissan as a company and as a motorsports company?
This is what it's about for us at Nissan. And one of the things we talk about is there's a lot of car enthusiasts within the company, and that's not by accident. I was joking with a couple people today. There's plenty of companies that sell washing machines and paper clips and so forth. We're not in that business. We're in the business of making products and cars that people love. And when we heard from John today, John's career and his accomplishments in racing really personify all those ideals and a lot of the things that make our company so special. And it's been our honor and our pleasure to be here today. I wish that all 1,300 employees of Nissan North America were fortunate enough to be here today and to hear him speak. So those of us who have been fortunate and lucky enough to be here for this opportunity, we're just enjoying every minute of it. It's really fantastic. And
Thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
So, all right, Ethan, thank you very much, my friend. John, it is a great honor. It has been a great pleasure to hang out with you this weekend, hear some of these stories. You guys can go have a good time. Thank you very much for joining us, both of you. We're going to get the rest of the evening set up here, so just go ahead and set those on the ground gently. John's still got books for sale out front, and you can probably get him to sign a book or two if you're nice. He's off the clock a little bit, but I've never heard this guy say no to anything yet. So thank you very much. Big hand for both these guys. 2 seconds for a thank you, so you're good on time? Absolutely, yeah. Go the broadcast. So Ethan just wants to thank a couple of people real quick. And again, we run this event for a dozen years now, and we have never had a manufacturer jump in and support this event quite as hard as Nissan. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much. And I know Ethan has some people to thank as well.
It's our pleasure. Thank you very much. Real quick, we just wanted to thank you. First, of course, we want to thank John Morton and Sylvia so much for being here. We want to thank Grassroots Motorsports Magazine, Tim Slutter, David Wallens, the entire staff at Grassroots Motorsports. It's been an honor and a pleasure to work with you guys. We want to thank Road Atlanta and all the staff, the safety staff, the co-workers, everybody who's working hard today. So thanks so much to Road Atlanta. We want to thank Adam Kroll and Matt DeAndrea. If you guys didn't get a chance to listen to Adam Kroll's CarCast, unbelievable. And we really appreciate all their support and also all the advocacy and support that Adam has given for the Datsun community. And of course, we want